I thought I knew my mother. I thought I knew everything about the woman who raised me with such fierce independence, who never let anyone tell her what to do, who built our modest life from nothing with hands that seemed to carry the weight of some unspoken burden. But when I found those letters hidden in my grandmother's attic 3 days after her funeral, I realized I didn't know my mother at all. The first letter was written in my mother's handwriting, but younger somehow. Shakier. The paper was yellowed and fragile, dated March 15, 1989. I was 32, sitting cross-legged on my grandmother's dusty attic floor, and I had no idea that this piece of paper was about to shatter everything I believed about my family. Mama Sarah, the letter began, and my heart stopped. My grandmother's name was Margaret. Not Sarah. I can't come back. Please don't look for me. Brother Joshua says I belong to them forever, but I know what they did to Rebecca. I know what they'll do to my baby. I took what was mine. What Papa David promised before what happened. Tell the others I'm grateful for everything, but I can't be part of the family anymore. The outside world isn't as dark as they told us. There's light here too. It was signed with a symbol I'd never seen before. Not my mother's name. Just a strange marking that looked like a cross wrapped in thorns. My hands were shaking as I reached for the second letter. This one was different paper, different ink. Official looking. It was addressed to Sarah Collins at my grandmother's address, postmarked 1991. Sister Sarah, your debt to the eternal family remains unpaid. You know what belongs to us. Brother Joshua grows impatient. The shepherd's mercy has limits. We know about the child. We know where you are. I dropped the letter like it was on fire. 24 hours later, I was sitting across from my mother at her kitchen table, the letters spread between us like evidence at a trial. Her face had gone completely white when she saw them, and for the first time in my life, I watched my strong, unshakable mother look genuinely afraid. Where did you find these? She whispered. Grandma's attic. Mom, what is this? Who are these people? She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Then she got up, walked to the window, and stared out at her garden. The garden she'd tended obsessively for as long as I could remember, always growing herbs I'd never heard of, always muttering words under her breath as she worked. I was hoping you'd never have to know, she said finally. Your grandmother, she wasn't my birth mother, Ellie. She saved me. The story came out in pieces, like she was pulling thorns from an old wound. My mother had been born into something called the eternal family. Not a family in any sense I understood, but a religious group that lived on a compound in rural Oregon. Her parents had joined when she was 2 years old, convinced they were finding salvation in the wilderness. Brother Joshua ran everything, she said, still staring out the window. He called himself our shepherd. Said the outside world was poison, that we were the chosen ones. Women weren't allowed to leave the compound without permission. Children belonged to the community, not their parents. And the money. She turned back to face me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not just fear. Rage. Every family that joined had to give everything to the eternal family. Everything. Your grandfather, my biological father, he'd been a successful contractor before they joined. When he died under suspicious circumstances, Brother Joshua claimed his life insurance money. $50,000. Said it belonged to God now. But you took it. I took what was mine. Her voice was steel. I was 16 and pregnant with you. They wanted to marry me off to Brother Marcus, a man in his 50s who already had 3 wives. They said it was God's will. They said the baby, you, belonged to the family. I felt sick. How did you escape? Your grandmother. She'd been sending letters to families on the compound for years, trying to help people leave. She helped me plan it. I waited until everyone was at evening prayer, then I ran. I had the insurance documents hidden in my Bible. I knew where Brother Joshua kept the checkbook. She sat back down, reached across the table, and took my hands. I forged his signature and took that $50,000. It wasn't stealing, Ellie. It was my father's money. My inheritance. But they've never seen it that way. We sat in silence for a moment. Then the question I was afraid to ask. Mom, do they know where we are? She squeezed my hands tighter. I thought they'd given up years ago. After we moved here, after you graduated college, I thought. I hoped they'd forgotten about us. The third letter was at the bottom of the box. I'd missed it the first time, hidden underneath some of my grandmother's old recipes. This one was postmarked 6 months ago. 6 months ago, and addressed to me. Eleanor Summers, it read. We know about your mother's theft. We know about the sacred funds she stole from God's work. Brother Joshua is willing to forgive, but debts must be paid. The money, with interest, now totals $200,000. Contact us within 30 days, or we will contact you. 30 days had passed 4 months ago. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother's garden, about the way she always locked every door and window before bed, about how she'd taught me to be independent almost aggressively. I thought about how she'd never talked about her childhood, never showed me photos, never mentioned relatives except for my grandmother. I thought about how she'd somehow managed to buy our house outright when I was 10, how she always paid for everything in cash, how she'd been able to send me to college without loans. $50,000 in 1989 would be worth a lot more now, especially if invested carefully. My mother had built our entire life on money the Eternal family considered stolen. The knock came at 7 a.m. I was at my mother's house, helping her make breakfast, when we heard it. Not a normal knock. Deliberate. Patient. The kind of knock that said whoever was outside wasn't going anywhere. My mother froze, spatula halfway to the pan. Ellie, she whispered. Go upstairs. Lock the bedroom door. Don't come down no matter what you hear. Mom, I'm 32 years old. I'm not hiding. Another knock. Louder this time. She looked at me, and I saw 20 years of fear in her eyes. Please. You don't understand what these people are capable of. I didn't listen. When she went to the front door, I followed. When she looked through the peephole and I watched the color drain from her face completely, I stood right beside her. Sarah. The voice from outside was calm, almost gentle. We know you're in there. We just want to talk. She leaned against the door like she could hold it closed through sheer will. We don't want any trouble, she called out. I don't have anything that belongs to you. A different voice now. Younger. Sister Sarah, Brother Joshua has been very patient. 25 years is a long time to wait for repentance. I reached for the door handle. My mother grabbed my wrist. Don't, she whispered. But I was already turning the deadbolt. There were 3 of them. 2 men and a woman, all dressed in simple, outdated clothes. The older man had gray hair and kind eyes that didn't match the steel in his voice. The younger man looked like he'd never smiled in his life. The woman kept her gaze fixed on the ground. Eleanor, the older man said, and I realized this had to be Brother Joshua. You look just like your mother did at your age. Such a blessing to finally meet you. You need to leave, I said. This is private property. He smiled. Actually smiled. Of course it is. Purchased with funds that belong to the Eternal family. We're here to discuss restitution. My mother stepped forward. I don't owe you anything, Joshua. That money was my father's insurance payout. You had no right to it. Your father pledged his worldly possessions to God's work when he joined our family. That includes any benefits received after his passing. His voice never wavered, never lost that gentle tone. Surely you understand that theft is a sin, Sarah. Even after all these years in the corrupt outside world. What my father pledged and what was legal are 2 different things, I said. And my name is Ellie, not Eleanor. Brother Joshua's attention turned fully to me. Your mother never told you about your true name, did she? Eleanor Ruth. Named for two of the most faithful sisters in our family's history. You were meant to be raised in the light of God's truth, not in this. He gestured around us, darkness. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. My birth certificate says Ellen Marie. Birth certificates can be changed, the younger man said. Especially when one has resources. My mother stepped between us. You need to leave. Now. Or I'm calling the police. The police? Brother Joshua laughed, and for the first time I heard something ugly underneath his gentle tone. Sarah. Do you really think the authorities will be sympathetic when they learn about the forged documents? The stolen funds? We have copies of everything, you know. Including your signature on Brother Marcus's insurance forms. I watched my mother's face crumble. I never signed anything for Marcus. Didn't you? Memory can be so unreliable after trauma. But documents don't lie. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. Would you like to see? This was wrong. Everything about this felt wrong. The way they stood too close, the way they spoke like they were discussing the weather instead of threatening my mother. The way the woman still hadn't looked up, like she was afraid to make eye contact. What do you want? I asked. Restitution, Brother Joshua said simply. $200,000. Plus a formal apology to the family for the pain your mother's betrayal caused. And? He paused, looked between my mother and me. We'd like you to visit the compound. See the good work your family's money could have done. The children who could have been fed. The souls who could have been saved. Absolutely not, my mother said. It's not really a request, Sarah. You see, we've been watching you both for some time now. We know about Ellie's job at the nonprofit. We know about her boyfriend, David. Nice man. Works late at the accounting firm on Thursdays, doesn't he? The cold in my stomach turned to ice. We know about your garden, Sarah. All those herbs you grow. Some of them quite unusual. I wonder what the neighbors would think if they knew about your continued practice of folk medicine. Your use of plants that aren't quite legal in this state? My mother had gone completely pale. Those are for cooking. Are they? Because Sister Rebecca, before her unfortunate passing, mentioned your particular skills with, shall we say, altered states of consciousness? Tools for spiritual enlightenment that the outside world has criminalized? I didn't understand what he was talking about, but I could see my mother did. She was shaking. 1 week, Brother Joshua said. Bring the money, or we'll be forced to take other measures to protect our family's interests. The compound is easy to find. Same place it's always been. Your mother knows the way. They turned to leave, and I should have let them go. I should have shut the door and called the police and figured out a way to protect my mother from whatever this was. Instead, I called out. Wait. Brother Joshua turned back, eyebrows raised. If we come, I said, if we visit your compound, you'll leave us alone? Ellie, no, my mother whispered. If you come, and you see the truth of what your mother stole from God's work, then we can discuss terms. His smile was back. Bring the money, and we'll call it even. Don't bring the money, well, we'll have to explore other options for restitution. After they left, my mother sat at her kitchen table and cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears I'd seen her shed at my grandmother's funeral. Deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from someplace she'd kept locked away for decades. I'm so sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry I brought this on you. I sat beside her and held her while she cried, and I tried to process what had just happened. My mother wasn't who I thought she was. My entire life had been built on a lie. And now these people, these strangers who claimed ownership over money and bodies and souls, were threatening everything I cared about. But here's the thing they didn't know about me. They didn't know that I'd spent the last 8 years working for a nonprofit that helped people escape from controlling relationships and dangerous situations. They didn't know that I'd seen every manipulation tactic, every guilt trip, every threat disguised as concern. They didn't know that I'd inherited more than just my mother's eyes and her stubborn streak. I'd inherited her survival instincts. That afternoon, I made some calls. "Rebecca Martinez," I said into the phone. "I need your help." Rebecca had been my supervisor at the nonprofit for 3 years before she moved to the FBI's criminal division. She specialized in financial crimes and cult activity. If anyone could help us understand what we were dealing with, it was her. "Ellie, what's wrong? You sound scared," I finished for her. "Becca, I need to know everything you can find about a group called the Eternal Family. Based in Oregon, run by someone called Brother Joshua." Silence on the other end of the line. "Then, how did you hear about them?" My stomach dropped. "You know them? We've been investigating them for 2 years. Tax evasion, marriage fraud, child endangerment. They're careful, but not as careful as they think." "Why are you asking about them?" I told her everything. The letters, the confrontation, the threats. By the time I finished, Rebecca was cursing under her breath in both English and Spanish. "They came to your house? Ellie, you need to file a police report. Today. They have documents they claim prove my mother forged insurance papers. Whether it's true or not, they have enough to make trouble for her. Honey, listen to me very carefully. These people are dangerous. We have 3 families who've come forward about financial extortion. One woman who claims they threatened her children when she tried to leave. You cannot give them money, and you absolutely cannot go to their compound." But even as she said it, I was already forming a plan. What if I wore a wire? Absolutely not. "Becca, they're not going to stop. You said yourself you've been investigating them for 2 years without enough evidence. What if I could get them to admit to the extortion? To the threats?" Another long silence. "Ellie, these aren't white-collar criminals running a sophisticated con. These are people who believe God speaks directly to them and justifies whatever they do. They're unpredictable. Then help me be prepared." That evening, I sat my mother down and told her what I'd learned. What Rebecca had told me about the FBI investigation, about other families who'd been targeted. I told her about my plan. She was horrified. "Ellie, no. You don't understand what that place is like. The isolation, the way they make you feel like you're going crazy. I spent 16 years believing I was worthless, that I existed only to serve them. I won't let you walk into that. Mom, they're not going to stop. And we can't run forever. We could move. Change our names again." "Again?" She looked down at her hands. "Ellen Marie isn't your first false identity, sweetheart. We've moved 3 times since you were born. Every time they got close, we ran." I stared at her. "What about college? My job? My life here? We could start over. We always have. I don't want to start over. This is my home. These are my friends, my community. And frankly, I'm tired of being afraid of people who have no right to control us." My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You have no idea what you're walking into." "Then tell me." She did. She told me about the compound's layout, about the way information was controlled, about the punishment rooms where disobedient members were sent for spiritual correction. She told me about Brother Joshua's private office, where he kept files on every current and former member. She told me about the way they used isolation and sleep deprivation to break down resistance. She also told me about their weaknesses. Their arrogance. Their absolute certainty that they were chosen by God and therefore untouchable. The way they documented everything, because they believed their actions were righteous and would be vindicated by history. "If you're going to do this," she said finally, "you need to understand that they'll try to separate us immediately. They'll want to talk to you alone, to convince you that I'm lost and you can still be saved. That's when they'll be most vulnerable. When they think they're converting you. 3 days later, Rebecca called me back. "We can't officially support this," she said. "But if you happen to be wearing a recording device during a social visit to some friends in Oregon, and if that device happened to capture evidence of federal crimes, well, that would be very interesting to us." She gave me an address where I could pick up some equipment. Nothing fancy, just a digital recorder small enough to hide and sensitive enough to pick up conversations clearly. She also gave me a phone number to call if things went wrong. 1 hour, she said. "If I don't hear from you every hour on the hour, I'm sending local police." The compound was exactly what I'd expected and nothing like I'd imagined at the same time. From the outside, it looked almost normal. A cluster of modest buildings surrounded by farmland, the kind of place you might find a small religious retreat or a family farm. But as we drove through the gate, I noticed the details my mother had told me to watch for. The way the fence was taller than it needed to be. The cameras mounted on poles throughout the property. The fact that the gate locked behind us with a sound like a prison door. Brother Joshua met us in what he called the welcome center, but which felt more like an interrogation room. Sparse furniture, no windows, one door. He was alone this time, but I could hear voices from other parts of the building. Lots of voices. "Sarah, Eleanor, welcome home." He gestured for us to sit in chairs that faced his desk. "I trust your journey was peaceful?" "It's Ellie," I said again. "And this isn't our home." "Isn't it? Your mother was born in the spirit here. You were conceived here, in the love of the family. This will always be your true home, no matter how far the world takes you from us." My mother shifted beside me. "We brought what you asked for," she said quietly. Brother Joshua's eyebrows rose. "All of it?" "A cashier's check for $50,000. The original amount. Without interest." "Sarah, we discussed this. The full debt, with interest, is $200,000. "The full debt is nothing," I said. "Because there was no debt. My grandfather's insurance money legally belonged to his next of kin. My mother." Brother Joshua smiled and leaned back in his chair. "Eleanor, you've been raised in a world that values material possessions over spiritual truth. In God's kingdom, all things belong to all people. Your grandfather understood this when he pledged his worldly goods to our family." "Show me the legal document." "Legal documents are constructs of a corrupt system. We operate under higher law. Then you have no legal claim to anything." His smile faded slightly. "Perhaps you'd like to see what your mother's theft has cost us. The children who might have been fed, the missionaries who might have been sent to spread God's word." He stood up and walked to the door. "Brother Marcus, would you join us please?" The man who entered was in his 70s now, but I recognized him immediately from my mother's description. This was the man they'd wanted her to marry when she was 16 and pregnant. He looked at my mother with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hunger, maybe. Or ownership. "Sister Sarah," he said. "You look well. The outside world has been kind to you." "Hello, Marcus." My mother's voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. "I've often wondered about the child," he continued, looking at me now. "My child, if Sarah had honored her commitment to our family." I felt something hot and sharp rise in my chest. "I'm not your anything." "Aren't you?" "Sarah was promised to me. Her child would have been raised as mine, in the light of God's truth. Instead." He gestured vaguely. "Look what the world has made of you. Angry, rebellious, lost." "I'm not lost. I'm educated. I have a career helping people escape from exactly this kind of manipulation." Brother Joshua and Brother Marcus exchanged a look. "Ah," Brother Joshua said softly. "A social worker. How noble. Tell me, Eleanor, in your work helping people escape from their commitments, do you ever wonder if you're actually leading them away from salvation?" "I help people get away from abusers who use religion to justify control." "Control," Brother Marcus repeated. "Is that what you think this is?" He walked over to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Sarah, do you remember Sister Rebecca? My mother went very still. Yes. She left us about 5 years after you did. Took her children, took some money that wasn't hers. She found the outside world very difficult, Sarah. Very dark. She came back to us 3 years later, begging for forgiveness. Begging to come home. He opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. A woman with hollow eyes and bruises on her arms. The world broke her, Sarah. Like it breaks everyone who leaves the family without God's blessing. She died 2 years ago. Alone. Poor. Addicted to the substances the world uses to fill the spiritual void. My mother was crying now, silently. Your theft, Brother Marcus continued, meant we couldn't help her when she needed us most. No resources for rehabilitation, no money for medical care. She died because of your selfishness. I stood up. That's enough. Sit down, Eleanor. No. I looked between the two men. This is manipulation, pure and simple. You're using a tragedy to make my mother feel guilty for escaping an abusive situation. You wanted to marry her off to a man in his 50s when she was 16 years old. That's not religion. That's trafficking. Brother Joshua's calm mask slipped for just a moment. You have no understanding of spiritual marriage. Of God's plan for. God's plan? Or your plan to control young women and their children? The door opened and 2 more men entered. Younger, larger. They didn't say anything, just positioned themselves near the door. I think, Brother Joshua said quietly, that you need to spend some time in reflection. Both of you. To understand the gravity of what you're facing. We're leaving, I said. I'm afraid that's not possible. Not until we've resolved this situation. My mother grabbed my arm. Ellie, sit down. Please. But I was done sitting down. I was done being polite to people who threatened my family and used dead women as emotional weapons. You know what I think? I said, stepping closer to Brother Joshua's desk. I think you're running a con. I think you've been extorting former members for years, using their guilt and fear to squeeze money out of them. I think Rebecca's death was convenient for you because now you can use her as a cautionary tale. Eleanor. And I think you're sloppy. Because threatening federal employees and their families across state lines is a felony. Because tax evasion is a felony. Because marriage fraud is a felony. Brother Joshua was standing now too, his face dark with anger. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? Rebecca Martinez sends her regards, by the way. FBI Criminal Division. She's very interested in your operation here. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the voices from other parts of the building seemed to have stopped. Then Brother Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. The FBI? Eleanor, sweet child, do you think we haven't dealt with government investigators before? Do you think we haven't been prepared for this day? He walked over to another filing cabinet and pulled out a different folder. This one was much thicker. We know about your friend Rebecca. We know about your job. We know about David's accounting firm and the very interesting discrepancies in their client trust accounts. My blood went cold. We know about your mother's garden and the very illegal plants she grows in her greenhouse. Plants that produce substances banned by federal law. He opened the folder and spread photographs across Brother Joshua's desk. Photos of my mother's greenhouse. Photos of David leaving his office late at night. Photos of me meeting with Rebecca. We know about the 3 families you helped relocate last year. Families who left their communities without paying debts to local businesses. Families who disappeared with children who had joint custody agreements. I stared at the photos. You've been watching us for months. Years, Brother Joshua corrected. We've been very patient, Eleanor. Very thorough. And now you understand why. My mother was looking at the photos too, her face white with shock. The question now, Brother Marcus continued, is whether you'd like to resolve this quietly, within our family, or whether you'd prefer to involve outside authorities who will find your own activities very questionable. I felt the walls closing in. They had enough to destroy my mother, to destroy David, to ruin my career and reputation. They'd been planning this for years, documenting everything, building a case against us while we thought we were safe. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what their arrogance and their certainty that God was on their side had blinded them to. I was recording everything. And Rebecca wasn't just my former supervisor. She was David's sister. And David's accounting firm wasn't hiding trust account discrepancies. They were helping federal investigators trace financial crimes by providing controlled access to their systems. And my mother's greenhouse didn't contain illegal drugs. It contained heritage medicinal plants that were part of a university research project on traditional healing methods. Everything they thought they had on us was either false or part of a much larger investigation they'd just confessed to obstructing. You're right, I said quietly. I don't want to involve outside authorities. Brother Joshua smiled. Wisdom at last. I'd rather let them handle this themselves. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Not to make a call, but to show them the active recording app that had been running since we walked into the building. You see, gentlemen, the FBI already is involved. Has been for months. This entire conversation has been transmitted to a federal task force that specializes in religious extremism and financial fraud. The silence this time was different. Absolute. Deadly. Brother Marcus moved toward me, but I held up my hand. I wouldn't. Agent Martinez has this location surrounded. Any attempt to detain us or harm us will result in an immediate raid on this entire compound. It was a bluff. Rebecca had backup plans in place, but not surrounding the compound. Not yet. But they didn't know that. Brother Joshua was staring at my phone like it was a snake. You're lying. Am I? You want to test that theory? I looked around the room, meeting each man's eyes in turn. Here's what's going to happen. My mother and I are going to walk out of here. We're going to get in our car and drive away. You're never going to contact us again. You're never going to threaten us again. You're never going to demand money that was never yours to begin with. And if we refuse? Brother Marcus asked. Then you'll be explaining to federal prosecutors why you've been running a decades-long extortion scheme against former members. Why you've been threatening to expose fabricated evidence. Why you've been crossing state lines to intimidate witnesses in a federal investigation. I put my phone back in my purse, but left the recording app running. Or you can take your chances with a jury of normal people who'll hear you explaining why a 16-year-old girl owed you money for escaping a forced marriage. Brother Joshua's calm facade was completely gone now. He looked like a man watching his entire world collapse. This isn't over. Yes, it is. I took my mother's hand and helped her stand. Because if anything happens to me, to my mother, to David, to anyone in my family, Agent Martinez has instructions to release this entire recording to every major news outlet in the country. Your faces, your names, your location, everything. We walked toward the door. The two large men stepped aside without being asked. Oh, and gentlemen? I turned back one last time. If you're ever thinking about contacting other former members, or threatening other families, you should know that the FBI task force has a very long list of people who've been waiting years for the courage to come forward. They won't be waiting anymore. We made it to the car. We made it through the gate. We made it 5 miles down the road before my mother pulled over and vomited. I held her hair back and rubbed her shoulders while she shook. I can't believe you did that, she whispered. I can't believe you survived 16 years of it. We drove home in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. It wasn't until we were back in her kitchen, doors locked, that I realized my hands were shaking too. Do you think they'll actually leave us alone? She asked. I think they'll have bigger problems to worry about soon. I was right. 3 weeks later, Rebecca called to tell me that the compound had been raided. Brother Joshua and brother Marcus were in federal custody on charges of tax evasion, mail fraud, and witness intimidation. 7 former members had come forward with similar stories of extortion and threats. The recording I'd made was evidence in a case that would eventually send both men to federal prison for 12 years. But that night, sitting in my mother's kitchen, we didn't know any of that yet. We just knew we were safe, for the first time in either of our lives. "I need to tell you something," my mother said eventually. "What?" "The money. Your college tuition, the house, everything I've been able to give you. It didn't all come from that $50,000. I waited. I invested it, yes. I was careful with it. But most of our financial security came from my work." "Your work?" She smiled for the first time in days. "I'm a freelance consultant for pharmaceutical companies. I develop traditional plant-based treatments for modern medical applications. Those herbs in my greenhouse? They're worth about $3 million in research contracts." I stared at her. $3 million? The folk medicine I learned at the compound, it was real. Ancient knowledge that Brother Joshua used to control people, but that I've been able to use to actually help them. I've been working with universities and medical research firms for 20 years. "Mom, you're a millionaire?" "We're millionaires, sweetheart. The house is in both our names. The investment accounts, the research contracts, everything. I never wanted to tell you because I was afraid they'd find us. But now." She reached across the table and took my hands. "Now you know the truth. All of it. Your mother isn't just a survivor, Ellie. She's a success. And they never got to see that coming." 6 months later, I was back at work, helping other families escape from controlling situations. My mother was consulting on a groundbreaking study of traditional healing methods that would eventually change how certain chronic illnesses were treated. David proposed to me in my mother's garden, surrounded by plants that had financed our freedom and would help heal others. The Eternal Family compound was sold at auction. The proceeds went to a fund for survivors of religious trauma. Brother Joshua died in federal prison 2 years later. Brother Marcus is still serving his sentence. And my mother's real name? It was never Sarah. She chose that name when she escaped, after the biblical Sarah who laughed at impossible promises and lived to see them come true. Her birth name was Eleanor. She named me after herself. After the woman she became when she decided she was worth more than what other people told her she was worth. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be small. Refuse to be quiet. Refuse to accept that other people's fear and control have any authority over your life. My mother taught me that. Not with words, but with 30 years of quiet courage that I didn't even recognize until I needed to find it in myself. If you've made it this far, maybe you recognize something in this story. Maybe you've dealt with people who thought they owned pieces of your life, your choices, your future. Maybe you felt trapped by other people's expectations or threats or manipulation. I'm here to tell you what my mother taught me: you're worth more than what they're offering. You're stronger than they want you to believe. And sometimes the best way to prove that is to stop explaining yourself and start protecting yourself. The recording is still in evidence storage somewhere. Sometimes I think about listening to it again, to remind myself how it felt to watch their certainty crumble when they realized they weren't dealing with the same frightened 16-year-old girl who ran away 30 years ago. They were dealing with her daughter. And her daughter had learned a thing or two about fighting back. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about people who refuse to stay quiet.